right, and now we're live streaming, so I'll say officially, good morning, welcome to Desert Palm. We like to begin by saying wherever you are in your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. We're a pretty diverse bunch, and we like diversity here at Desert Palm. I think Mark has a couple announcements.
Sure, you can go on down to, well, we already talked about that. Keep going.
I think we might
People
still
at
need some
home saw
volunteers
this.
for the pancake supper.
Yes.
So Sue, who was telling us the story of finding her glasses, talk to Sue if you'd like to volunteer.
And
or Lee.
Les
Yes, I'm
Kowski,
sorry, yeah.
yes. And next one, you want to?
Yeah, so I think everybody's now familiar with Shay, who has her nonprofit Doing Grief. She's offering some small group grief-related work for us here at Desert Palm. And during Lent, Shay is going to be offering adult ed experience after church each Sunday during the Sundays in Lent there. And she gave an introductory overview of the work that she does. And I just find her work so deeply moving. She's really got a knack for creating safe places, inviting people to share. So I'm excited that we're collaborating with Shay in that way.
All right, and then a couple save the dates coming up is in supporting our local artists, March 27th, Claudia and Mary Petrich. And who else is going to be playing with you, Claudia, that night? Say? Connor, yay. Well, other people, but it's a lot of fun. It'll be a lot of fun. And I think that was, oh, next slide. Actually this, so for Easter Sunday, you definitely want to be here Easter Sunday. I know normally we're really packed, but you're all familiar with Handel's Messiah, and two wonderful composers and arrangers took it and created what's called the Gospel Messiah. So on Easter Sunday, it's going to be Too Hot to Handle, Jazz and Gospel Messiah. One of my really good friends, I'm lucky to have her as a friend, Chanel Bragg, is going to be our guest vocalist as part of that. It's the part 2 of Handel, the Passion section, and it's going to be really powerful and fun and lots of beautiful music, and several other guest instrumentalists will be joining us for that. So I'm really excited about that coming up.
Awesome. That's funny. Mark looks at me and says, it's part 2 of Handel, and I'm just nodding like, yes, I know what that means. I have no idea. I don't think Johnny Cash sang any Handel, you know.
Well, it's a hallelujah chorus that you'll have to stand up and move to. We'll just
awesome.
Put it that way.
Cool. I'm sure it's going to be great. Well, I just want to say a quick word about our service today. We've been acknowledging the challenging times that we're all living in. What's happening in the country, and the pendulum has been swinging a little bit in terms of how we've been engaging in terms of personal suffering, how it's hard on just individuals. A lot of anxiety right now, and today I'm going to be trying to say some things collectively about. I'm really taking a big picture view. I think obviously there's been other similarly traumatic, catastrophic times in history where there's been big ruptures in society. And so in order to help us deal with that and think about that, I'm going to be talking about the way the Earth heals itself following catastrophic ruptures in the ecosystems. So that's my general approach, and I have found sometimes putting things out there in broad general terms helps you all understand what it is that I'm trying to say. So that's kind of the general topic of the time. And I think it just helps to acknowledge that because oftentimes we compartmentalize things, and in the back of our mind somewhere we're feeling like there's a sense of urgency, there's a great sense of uncertainty and concern about marginalized groups. And so this is a safe place where we can allow these things into our consciousness, we can engage, we can talk about one of the things, you know, the title of my sermon today is Spiritual First Responders. And and the general idea is when there's something bad happening, you know, that it's easy, it's understandable to want to run the other way. You know, that's just part of the human reaction that we have. Even when we're hurt, you know, I'm kind of a sissy. When I'm injured, I don't want to look at the injury, you know. But we all know that what first responders do is when everybody else is running away from the disaster, they're running towards it. And I think as a faith community, as people who are aspiring to be brave and courageous and loving and compassionate, when bad things happen, we want to go towards the situation to be present with each other, to do what we can. So that's the general theme we're going to be working with today. Let's enter into that theme with some music.
Please rise in body or spirit for the call to worship. When the raging storms are knocking the floorboards apart, when shrouded skies suddenly dump their weight onto the roof, when the windows could give way at any moment to the fierce winds, there is much we put to sleep in order to keep on going. Then the storm eases, but doesn't really end, and sodden days stretch to gloomy weeks, to long months, and what was asleep remains asleep. And one day, maybe the storm finally breaks, releasing its last few holds. The sky's clear, the sun shines. It's disorienting and glorious. Finally, we are able to wake up, to stop surviving, to walk the floors and survey the damage, see if the roof held, if the windows will open again. Do not be afraid if the waking unleashes the true flood. You held back so much during this hard time. It didn't go away. It was just put aside so you could keep on going. Good news, friends. You were held when you suffered. You are held when you cry, and you will be held when you dance by our loving God. This morning, loving God, as we gather to worship and experience the liberation through healing. Amen.
Join me in our opening hymn, I Sing the Mighty Power of God.
You're standing. Let's take a moment to pass the peace of God to our neighbors. Peace, Ellen. Also with you. Peace, Marshall. Peace, Ellen. Peace, Greg. Good to see you, man. Don't forget that I got that frame for you. Peace. Also with you? Oh, wow. Awesome. Welcome. Peace.
All right, if you'll join me in singing our children up for the intergenerational moment.
Look, we have Leo and Harper in the house. It's been a while. So welcome here. I'm so happy, and I know that our Sunday school teacher, Denise, is too. So you guys can go ahead with the first slide. All right. These headlines have just been an assault, and so Tom and I were talking about it, and we thought, like, let's not let it go by and not talk to our youth about it. So, but let's also not let go by that there's progressive churches and progressive leaders that are helping to combat and to, well, they're helping to ease the way for, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Next slide. All right, so there's one of our progressive leaders. Remember, she called to have mercy upon the people? Okay, all right. So we came up with a 3-part curriculum. Next slide. It's called Radical Inclusion. And we wanted to touch upon areas that we see on TV, but we also wanted to say, here's progressive churches and here's what they're doing. Go ahead and do the next slide. So that's what we're going to do over 3 parts. Analyze current events, understand radical inclusion from a UCC faith perspective, explore biblical and theological foundations for the LGBTQ, identify ways to foster radical inclusion within our own community. So we're really excited about that. We hope it'll be a good thing for the youth to see and to hear about our faith and what we have to say to all these negative headlines. So thank you all for listening to my speech. I appreciate it. Let's go to Sunday school.
We have a special reading today called 2 Storms, 2 Stories. It's Mark 4:35 through 41 and Mark 6:47 through 53. This is based on a blog by Marin C. Tirabassi. I hope I say her name correctly. There were 2 storms, and Jesus calmed the winds and waves both times. Maybe there were 5 or 7 storms, or even 20. We don't know. But we know that Mark told 2 stories and the others followed him. In one story, Jesus is in the boat, lying asleep below, when the disciples wake him terrified, and he stills the storm. While in the other story, they are alone, and Jesus sees them struggling and walks across the water. They fear the stranger as much as the deep, but he climbs into their boat and the winds die down. Mark looked down the years at people like me and knew I need both stories. You see, people dear to me go out into the storms of life, the heartbreak, cancer, loneliness, loss, and they have Jesus in their boats. They may complain that he sleeps and shake him wildly, and the peace be still that comes may challenge their faith as much as the greatest wind, but Jesus never leaves them alone. But there are also those people just as dear to me, who lift anchor and sail alone, choosing to strain lonely at the oars against every wind all the night long. And I believe that Jesus knows their courage and their danger too, and walks across the waves to them, uninvited and unexpected, and gets in the boat with them, saying, "You don't have to recognize me, but take heart. And when the wind lets up, they may not even then understand." And so ends the reading.
Yeah, so we've got two stories today, and I'm going to be focusing on one, the story where Jesus is in the boat, he's asleep, there's a storm, the disciples wake him up. So I'd imagine this is a familiar story to most all of us. And I think usually, there's kind of a general overriding tendency of the way we handle these stories. With this one, it's usually we go right to this moment where Jesus tells the storm to be still and calms the seas, and there's this very dramatic moment. But I want to begin a little bit earlier in the story because I think it's relevant to the work that we need to be doing as agents of healing in our society. And again, the larger theme today is just going to be how can we pull together, what wisdom can we draw from to help society heal? How can we be part of that process? So it occurred to me that we often overlook this detail that Jesus was asleep in the boat. And that got me curious, so I started looking at that. And of course, it's a affirmation of his humanity. He was tired, right? But I think there's more to it. I think when a detail like that finds its way into the gospel story, these things have been polished to such an extent that every detail is important. And when you stop and you think about it, sleep is something that we all do every night. And at the deepest level, I want to suggest that it is the umbilical cord that connects us to the earth that birthed us as a species. I picked up this fascinating book called Why We Sleep by this professor of psychiatry from Harvard. I think now he might be at USC, Matt Walker. And he's written this book about sleep. And it is so fascinating. I'm just going to mention a couple of things to help us put this in perspective. But he talks about in the history, in the evolutionary history of life on the planet, you see sleep emerging in a few different groups of animals. Birds sleep, mammals sleep. There's some of the newest research indicates that there might be some lizards that sleep. And Matt Walker, this Harvard psychiatrist, says if this turns out to be substantiated, our understanding of when sleep emerged in the evolutionary history of life will have to be moved back about 100 million years. So no matter how you slice it, sleep, his point that it has emerged in birds and mammals is to say the evolutionary forces that are at work in the natural world to draw forth sleep in these two different large groups of animals there's something profoundly important about sleep. And then he tells one of the many things that's fascinating. I could get lost in this book, and I just want to touch on it briefly, but he talks about how birds have evolved and they're sleeping And what they do, oftentimes we see birds in a row on a wire. He says when birds sleep, the part of the flock that's within those 2 sentries fall completely asleep. Both of their hemispheres, I guess they have 2 hemispheres too, fall asleep. But the bird on the outer side, this part of his brain stays awake, and he's looking with one eye towards any threat that might come from this direction. This part of the brain goes to sleep. And the bird on the other end of that row is doing the opposite thing. And after a few hours of rest, each sentry turns around so that the other half of their brain can be refreshed. I just thought that was so fascinating. So the question arises, why is it so important? Well, another thing he said, this is another detail I have to mention. He says he thinks that because sleep was so important, that's what brought us down out of the trees. Because if you think about it, it's hard to get a good night's sleep in a tree, right? You think you might fall off the branch. So he says we came down to the ground. Wow, that's how important sleep here. So there's something obviously important about this. I think there's something healing and restorative. This is what he unpacks in the book, how important it is for memory, for creativity. So this is what Jesus was doing prior to waking up and calming the storm. And I just have to wonder, out of curiosity, if Jesus might have been dreaming. And if he was, what that dream might have been like. Kind of a beautiful thing to wonder about. So there's obviously something very renewing about sleep. And I really do see it as part of the healing, renewing, restorative nature of the universe. We've been talking about that. And as I mentioned, as it turns out, sleep is something that has been evolving for millions of years. It's intimately related to memory, to creativity, and of course to survival. The U.S. military is very interested in sleep and how people can function with less sleep, and you can just imagine. I suspect that our species has had long periods in which we have essentially been sleeping, resting, renewing, absorbing the memory of the past and preparing to awaken in ways that will create new patterns, new blossoming of thoughts, new systems for being. The self-described geologian, not a theologian or a geologian, but he calls himself a geologian, Thomas Berry, he writes a beautiful essay called The Dream of the Earth, in which he invites us to consider our deep, integral connection to the natural world which birthed us, to say essentially that we are part of the dream of the earth. So if we take this story of Jesus sleeping in the boat during the storm as a parable, that then we can begin to glean some ideas about how we might be renewed in our own challenge to wake up to the storm that we are in. I think it's interesting to note, too, that it could have been a war, right? There could have been a battle. The Roman soldiers could have been coming, and the disciples might have said, Jesus, wake up, wake up. It could have been a man-made storm, but in this story, it's a storm in nature, a dramatic expression of creation's great power, part of the unfolding of the universe. I think we can take this as an indication of Jesus' deep connection to the natural world. Remember, he often pointed to the natural world when he tried to teach us about the nature of spirituality, faith is like a seed. Our relationship to God is like a vine and branches with grapes ripening to be transformed into wine. He's all of these things drawing from nature to help us understand our own natures. So in this era of hatred and division, I think the pressing question becomes, what might nature have to teach us about this process of healing, of restoration, of renewal, so that we can tap into that healing power when we need it? And I think it's very clear that we need it now in a very profound way. A scientist named Janine Benyus has studied the Earth's healing powers and the patterns, and she has a deep grasp of how the planet heals. I'm gonna quote her at length here, so I just want to give you a little snippet of a bio about her. Janine Benyus is an American natural science writer, innovator and consultant and author. After writing books on wildlife and animal behavior, she coined the term biomimicry to describe the intentional problem-solving design inspired by nature. I'm going to read to you an interview with her. At this point in the interview, she's describing how the planet heals itself following a catastrophic event like a landslide. And I'm not sure why, but this feels pretty relevant right now. So you can hear this on two levels. Scientifically, she's talking about what the Earth actually does, but I think metaphorically we can think about this in terms of what we need to do to try to help the system heal. She says, so say a landslide comes through. There's this beautiful succession of things that happen where at first, the first ones come in type 1 species, and we can call them weed species. They're annual plants, and they come in, and what they're doing is basically spreading out as quickly as they can to cover the ground. She says, because in the context of healing, the first thing is don't let the good stuff out. She says it's like when your skin is cut and your skin scabs over. That's partially to keep the good things that need to be kept contained. The earth does the very same thing. When there's a rupture in the surface of the earth, these plants come to immediately seal that over. So that's their job. They come in and they put all of their energy into creating these small bodies and seeds, not a lot of roots, and those seeds then blow off to the next opening that needs healing. I'm going to continue with what she says. What they've done, though, is to soften up the soil, starting to put nutrients in, and the next group is the shrubs and the berries, and they start to put down roots. They're going to stay for a while, and they start what's called facilitating. They start shading little seedlings, keeping the wind away. There's this whole chaperoning and facilitation that happens at the surface of the earth to heal the wound. In the shade and the windshield of these trees, of these shrubs, little seedlings start, and then those seedlings become the overstory that we know so much about. The forest returns. So literally, she says, it is a progression of making way, making things more and more fertile for the next cohort to come. So there's this incredible generosity, and everyone has their place in this system of healing. And I just have to interject here, because Shay refers to her work as healing circles. And what Benyus says is these things happen in circles. When these plants begin to form, they do it in circles. That's how the earth heals. In fact, Benyus says, when people ask me, how are things going in relation to the healing of the earth, I think, well, the circles of healing are starting to grow. And they're starting to grow towards each other. That's how it works. So if we were to reach out our hand in the dark at this point, we just might find another hand reaching out to us. Circles of healing coming together to heal the division. So I want to try to unpack this a little bit and relate it to what we're doing as a church, as a faith community, as one of the healing circles that Benyas refers to, that have appeared and are constantly appearing as the world seeks to heal from its ruptures and its traumas. This, of course, has obvious implications for all of us, for us personally, as we seek to heal from the traumas and the experience of our lives. And Shay is going to be taking the other story where Peter gets out of the boat and Jesus is walking on the water. So she's going to be exploring this from the perspective of personal healing. So this morning, I really want to try to help us think about these disruptions in terms of the whole geopolitical balance of the world and the rupture and the trauma that has been inflicted on the soul of America, I think we could say. And I think it's important to recognize that, we don't want to just simply get caught up in the sky is falling kind of mindset, as easy as it is, right? But I think, like Jesus taught us, we want to draw from the wisdom of the natural world so we can respond in harmony with the deeper rhythms of the universe. I want to draw on that quote by Benyas that I shared, and I just want to note that one of the first things that needs to happen is we need to be aware of the trauma, and we need to be willing to move towards it. We've got some good things that we don't want to lose, right? Things like democracy and love and compassion and the celebration of justice and equality. There's hope. We don't want to lose hope. It's like the mythical story of Pandora when she opens the box and all these things fly out. She manages to capture hope. She holds on to hope, and I think that's what we want to do as well. It's easy to lose hope these days, but I think it helps to remember that most of these problems that we're dealing with are problems that are arising from modernity, right? So that's like the past few centuries. I mean, the past couple thousand years, if we want to just look at the evolution of civilization as we tend to think about it. But the spiritual wisdom of the earth has been unfolding in a process that reaches back millions and billions of years. And deep down in our psyches and souls, we are rooted to that deep wisdom. And as Jesus showed us, we can tap into it. That's what he was trying to help us do by saying, look at the seed. Look at the mustard seed. Vines and branches. I think it's no small matter that the earth seeks to heal itself. Remember that fascinating observation that goes back to this idea that planet is alive? When Lovelock, this NASA researcher, was trying to understand what it means to be alive, and he was looking at research that showed that when the sun warmed up for a few 100 million years, the earth responded by cooling off. So there's this system level capacity to survive, to adjust the whole system, just like our body responds to illness. So this idea that the earth can heal itself is huge. It's profound. And I think it's just a small step from that observation to this idea that psychologically and spiritually we too are inclined towards healing and renewal. It's no coincidence that Jesus was a healer. And I think in the same way that doctors and physicians and psychologists and psychiatrists are bringing about healing, that society too is in need of healing. I mean, I think we can all feel that right now. The human family is afraid and anxious. We need to come together. There are forces that we are still just beginning to understand that are born of fear and distrust, and they pull us apart. They shatter the unity. They cause a wound in the fabric of community. But there are other forces that grow out of this deep knowledge that we belong here, that the universe can be trusted, and that is renewing and healing, to begin to open, to be moved by, to be inspired by, so that we can harmonize with those energies. So Jesus, he awakens in a storm. He isn't overwhelmed. He, despite the fact that he was awoken from sleeping, he's a little irritable, "O ye of little faith," right? He kind of gives the disciples an elbow there after he calms the storms. But I think, again, it's important that he was sleeping, maybe dreaming. Walker, this Harvard psychiatrist, says one of the reasons sleep and dreaming have evolved is because of the neuroplasticity we have in our brains, that we are part of evolution. And when we sleep and dream, we are fostering, nurturing our own creativity. So Jesus, as a religious genius, was asleep and dreaming the future of humanity, the Beatitudes, this message of peace, of love, and compassion, all the things that the powers that be are trying to stamp out now. He awoke in the time of his own storm, and he said to the storm, "Be still." And he calmed a raging sea. It sounds impossible, It's like part of us, that the scientific part of us, ironically, we lag so far behind science, when we are scientific. We think this is just impossible stuff. But I just want to point out in this context that Black Elk, the Lakota Sioux shaman, religious leader who later converted to Catholicism or integrated Catholicism, he could hear his ancestors speaking to him through the thunder. So maybe there's more to these storms. Maybe there's more to the natural world. Maybe there's more to us being here and being part of this universe than meets the eye. If we learn to open up to our ancient stories, we can grow into these things. If we follow the path that Jesus forged, we will be spiritual first responders. We will not turn and run from the pain of the world. And we're not going to scratch our heads and be like, "Oh, wow, how can these things be happening?" There are historical precedents in all the previous totalitarian regimes which have suppressed education, suppressed women, and suppressed the press. right? So, I mean, there's really nothing new about what's happening right now. But each time we turn to engage the storm, we do it with new knowledge, a deeper understanding of who we are and where we are and what the forces are that we are opposing. And armed with this new knowledge, we can enter the fray. We can go to where the crisis is. So even in the midst of this societal landslide, people of faith and goodwill are moving towards the wound. I've been so inspired by so much that I see that's going on in the world, the UCC, the interfaith agencies that we are a part of. So many people moved by compassion and loving to give up, trusting in the deep self powers of the universe showing up here. The early church rose up with the peace of the Roman Empire. In a similar way, I look around and I see so many people of deep faith who are not running. That's not to say that we're not freaking out a little bit. I mean, I think, there's a high level of anxiety, and that's understandable. I think that's appropriate. But I think that anxiety is like the anxiety that the FDNY firefighter Dave Fontana felt on 9/11 when those planes hit the towers. I'm sure he was thinking about his wife and his young son when he clocked out on 9/11 was his wedding anniversary, clocked out, and then the alarm came on that something was happening in Manhattan. He was in Brooklyn. So he got on the truck and went to the danger zone. I fell in love with Dave's wife, and Marion and I were together for a few years, and at one point we thought we had a fire at the house, and she was, of course, friends with all of the firefighters. So this alarm went off at the firehouse on Staten Island that there's a fire at Marion's house. And I'll never forget standing out there as the fire truck approached. And this good friend of Dave's and a good friend of Marion's and their son, Aiden, and I was getting to know John too. He jumped off that fire truck, and it was very clear that he was prepared to do whatever had to be done to save that family. That is what first responders do. I think the ultimate challenge for us is to be spiritual first responders, not to give in to fear, not to run, to acknowledge our anxiety, but to then pull together. And we're not being asked at this point to rush to our deaths. We're being challenged to talk honestly and openly to our neighbors. Neighbor, turn that damn phone off. Sorry. We're needing to voice our sense of alarm over, the head of the military being fired because he's black. We got to kind of talk honestly about these things, right? We have to be able to engage around the environment. We have to stand up for diversity. It's so important. Diversity, equity, inclusion. These are not dirty words. These are nothing to be ashamed of. It's a dangerous time when we have to be careful about using words like love and compassion. We have to support our interfaith groups that are saying we're one human family, and all the religions need to be respected and affirmed. I was at an interfaith meeting. We had an interfaith meeting here just last week, here at Desert Palm. And I'll tell you, folks, you know, I mean, I'm only human, you know, at times I too feel overwhelmed by all that's going on in the world. But attending meetings like this, you know, with these faith leaders from these other traditions, I just felt like this is so cool and so beautiful. I mean, everybody's worried, but they're here, and we're together. There's a power in community. So that experience strengthened my hope, seeing these good people simply show up. So Desert Palm, in all of your connections, in all of your communities, in this community, keep showing up. Amen.
Wow, that was quite a sermon, huh? Okay, I've got my composure back. Strength, this is the call to offering. Strength is commanding the wind and sea to obey. Strength is wielding a slingshot in the face of a raging giant. Strength is accepting vulnerability from inside the boat. Strength is standing in solidarity with the powerless. Strength is turning a cheek. Strength is loving an enemy. We come to offer our gifts to be a vessel of justice and honor, a God who redefines our vision of strength.
It is time for me to move from my shelter of safety, to sail as a pilgrim over the waves of the sea. It is time to be still and to seek the God of my soul, time to rest, time to leave behind my fears. And I will not fear the storm, though it rages around me, for slowly I am learning to place my trust in you, to forgive every hurt and to loosen every burden, to let go and to follow where you lead. I will lift my eyes to the mountains, from where shall come my help. My help shall come from the Lord. So I walk in the light of the path set before me, for I know your love will show me the way. Though I know you have prepared a path for me to follow, I'll never know for certain that I follow where you lead. Still I trust my desire to please you will guide me, and I trust that you will keep me from harm. I will lift my eyes to the mountains, from where shall come my help. My help shall come from my God. So show me the way. I may stumble, I may fall and get lost on the journey, and my path will surely lead me to the shadow of death. Yet I will not fear the storm, for you are ever with me, never leaving me to face my fears alone. I will lift my eyes to the mountains, from where shall come my help. My help shall come from my God. So I'll walk in the light of the path set before me, for I know your love will show me the way.
The winds of life's terror and wave storms of my reality are about to drown me. Peace be still. Splashes of disappointment, pain, fear, and guilt have entered our boat. And I thought you were present. It doesn't feel like it. Peace be still. Your rest contradicts my restlessness, and I am shaken up. How are you in this boat with me, and yet I can't feel you? Peace be still. You calm the winds and the waves in the moments of our despair. I doubted you, but instead of condemning me, you proved yourself to me. Our doubts are beneath you. Our fears are not above you. Our storms may all surround you, and still they answer to your word. Teach us how to be peace. Teach us how to be. Teach us how to be still. Peace be still.
Join me in our closing hymn, Be Still My Soul.
hold on to what is good. And remember to rest and sleep and dream your soul and body need. Amen. Now we'll do our sung benediction.